Have you ever played a 100% accuracy game? Have you ever checkmated your opponent with a pawn? The game we're about to review is a game I got where I got both of those accolades. 100 accuracy, pawn checkmate. It's going to stem from a King's Gambit. As everybody knows, I exclusively play the King's Gambit with the white pieces. People say it is refuted. I beg to differ. I'm over 2,600 on chess.com playing only this. I'm going to show you guys the game, and then I'm going to show you every single trap I know in the King's Gambit that titled players even fall into, and hopefully you guys give it a try. Let's get into the game. We get pawn takes, we get a King's Gambit accepted, and pawn to g5, the main line trying to hold on to this f4 pawn. We get pawn to h4, this is the line I enjoy playing, and pawn to g4. Now where do you put this knight? There's two lines, knight e5, which the computer prefers, knight to g5, which I prefer. So I play the move I prefer. Knight to g5, it's called the Algier counter gambit. Now, what black is supposed to play here is h6, but we're going to get into the theory after the game. First, I'm just going to show you the game. My opponent turns into 300 elo. He wanted to be on guess the elo, I suppose, and he played pawn to f6. A horrible move at face value. It's a move I don't think many even 1200s would play. Why is it a mistake, though? It's a good trap to know. Well, you take this pawn on g4, giving up the knight, and then you have queen h5 check. Right? It looks like those beginner's traps, and it kind of is. What do you do after king e7? Of course, you take the pawn on g5. Now, in this position, what black needs to do is go knight to f6, blocking the check, and then e5, and white is winning. Would I have gotten 100 accuracy had this happened? Most likely not. Most likely not. We get king to e8. Now, maybe he thought I was going to pick up the rook like those beginner traps, but I'm not. I'm going to go queen h5, forcing his king back to e7, and now I'm going to give the check because the major difference is that the distance of the check is closer, meaning it's stronger because less things can block, because there's less distance, less squares to block the check with. So the king has to move to f7. Should you take the rook right now? No. Gain tempo. Bishop to c4. Development with a check oftentimes is a good move. Pawn to d5 is the best move. Why is that better than moving the king? Well, it's better than moving the king because it opens up the light squared bishop, so it prolongs the inevitable by just a few moves, but it does make the game a few moves longer. We get king to g6, pawn to h5 check, and the king is forced to h6. It's a nice forcing line. Thank you to my opponent. I don't know how you went f6. We get queen takes f4 check. He blocks with the queen. How do you mate them? You take the bishop. Their only move is queen g7, and the beautiful pawn checkmate is pawn to d4. Now, I know you might guys be like, okay, well, he played horribly. Well, yes, but it's 16 moves, 100 accuracy, King's Gambit checkmate. And now I'm going to show you every single trap I know in the King's Gambit. So stick around. Everybody dislike and unsubscribe as always, because we probably got some out-of-pocket jokes incoming. So e4, e5, f4. What should we look at first? What should we look at first? Let's look at d5. Many people think this is the refutation to the King's Gambit. I think not. But it is the Falkbeer counter gambit, and it's a good gambit. You should take the pawn on d5, at which point they should not take the pawn with the queen. I know I've played WGM Nemsko many times in this, back when my rating was super low, only like 2,400. Nowadays, I don't get paired against her. I guess my rating's too high. But she always went queen takes d5 and then proceeded to blunder her queen. As they say, sent them back to the kitchen, right? Not even going to explain that that's a joke because I don't need to. Because I don't feel like it. So I'm going to show you the trap. Most of the time it happens after e takes f4, knight to f3, and then say queen takes pawn. So why is this a bad move? Well, it's a bad move because you gain a tempo on the queen. If they go to c6, you go bishop to b5 and you win the queen that way, but that's not the trap. A WGM will not fall into that. What they will fall into is the move king f2. King is the best piece in the endgame. Maybe even the opening sometimes. King to f2. All right, so why does it look like a mistake? Maybe it's a mouselet. But they believe, in principle, it's good to develop with a check. Chess is position specific, so this is not one of those cases. Pawn to d4, opening up the dark squared bishop for development, controlling the center. Do you see how you win the queen here? Bishop to b5 check. They move the pawn, rook to e1. There's no longer a king on e1, so the rook could come on e1. somehow. Study your traps. If you fall into a trap once, you should study it so you don't fall into it again. Now, let's get into more stuff. So, for example, more stuff would be what better people play, that is knight f6. This is what IMs and GMs play, but I'll show you traps that they fall into. Pawn to c4, defending the pawn, holding on to the pawn. And they don't study this all too often, that's why I love it. Pawn c6, pawn d4 takes. It's kind of like a queen's gambit and a king's gambit combined. You get what I'm saying? You gambited this pawn for the center, you gambited this pawn for the... Except we're not, we're pushing, we're going c5, we're overextending, but the point is it blocks in this dark squared bishop. Now, what good players do here is they play b6, right? They try to pry open the queen side to make some sense. It is the best move. They are good players. You try to hold on. It really resembles a queen's gambit to me. So this position is fascinating. I absolutely love this because it makes players burn time. And it's, if you know the lines really well, you'll see the bar is equal, but it's indefensible for black almost. So you have a big attack. Their a pawn is pinned. They take, you might be like, queen d7 only move. You might be like, I don't get it. You're just going to be worse. You just are down tempo. Your queen's not in a good spot. Look at this. Knight c3. Amazing stuff. The point is after they take, you might be like, Balkandad, you just blundered. You move the knight, you lose the queen. You take the queen, you lose a pawn. Bad stuff. No, good stuff. Knight to e5, getting a tempo on the queen. A switch. They have to take, at which point you take back. You're threatening this fork, everything of the sort. They block the fork, and here there's many moves. Computer likes a3. Sometimes I take, sometimes I push. Really depends on what type of mood I'm in, right? Depends on what type of mood. The bar is even. It's a very wacky, very peculiar position. Only a handful of times have I faced someone who holds this with black. Usually they just fall apart instantly. I know a3 is very liked to open up some files. Of course, you're going to take that. It's a very fun line, very interesting line at that. Now let's get into the more common traps. So let's mouse slip. Let's say pawn to f4 takes. What trap should we look at? Let's look at this. So the Fischer defense. What is the history of the Fischer defense? Well, Spassky and Fischer had a game. They had a game, and Spassky spanked him using the King's Gambit, accepted. Fischer then did what every chess player does when they lose a chess game. He locked himself in his room for a month, stared at the ceiling, came out of the room after a month and said, I refuted the King's Gambit, right? As every normal chess player in history would do. But pawn to d6 is a very good line. It's the Fischer defense nonetheless. I recommend the move bishop to c4. Now, it's funny. It looks like an Italian. I have some students who, let's say I'm going over a d4 opening, and they're like, what should I do against e6? They're like, what should I do if they play the French? I'm like, but it's not the French. They're like, but they played e6. I'm like, but is your pawn on e4? No, it's on d4. Completely different position. But if that's how you think, if that helps you remember, by all means think that way. Because opening names, as long as you know the moves, right? Bishop to c4. Now, I've recognized that a lot of people mix up their lines when they play the Fischer defense and play g5, mixing it with the main line. This is not so good though, because after h4, they extend and you go knight to g5. It's like the Algier Gambit, like what we got in the game, but you're not even giving up a knight on f7, which we will get to. They have to go knight h6, and look at this. You have full center. You're going to recapture. You're going to castle. You're just going to crush. It's really just what you're going to do if you reach this position. So they should not go pawn to g5. What they should do is go pawn to h6, trying to go g5, which is why white should go pawn to h4, stopping pawn to g5 because of the pin. Look at this. So knight to f6 attacking the pawn, knight to c3 defending the pawn, and bishop to g4 pinning your pawn, right? People like pins. Then pawn to d4, aiming at this pawn. Essentially, everybody I face in this position plays the move knight to h5. A mistake. Even in the Masters database, they play this. This is what I'm talking about. King's Gambit is a good one. I don't know why my voice is getting high. We'll stop. Knight to e5. Did I just lose my queen? No. Look at this. Bishop takes f7, king e7, knight to d5, checkmate. You might be like, Balkandad, you're playing hope chess. Sometimes. You're right. But what if they don't take the queen? What if they just take the knight? Fair statement. Best move as well. You take the bishop. They have to move the knight. You move the queen here. You're threatening everything under the sun. If they take with the queen, perhaps, you go check. They block. Bishop takes f7 is a move I know. If they take, you win the queen. There's no discovered check because your knight is there. If they go king e7, they get mated in one move. Gotten that a handful of times. What else have I gotten? I've gotten pawn takes. And then it enters an extremely wacky position with pawn to e5. That's, I recommend you guys look at. Computer likes knight to d5. I like pawn to e5. I don't always listen to the computer when I'm studying. I like to find lines I like these lines. And I hope you guys like them too. Let's get into the Algier, because isn't that what we started the video with? Indeed it is, indeed it was. So boom, boom, boom. All right. So what they should do is go pawn h6. And I think the reason people think the King's Gambit is refuted is because they play this move bishop to c4, even in the Masters database. This is a horrible move. Disgustingly horrible move. Bishop to c4. Yes, it gains a tempo with check on the king. But the point is they go d5. And it's a move you really never want to deal with, because they go king g7 and now they guard g4. So that's why black always tries to open up this light squared bishop when facing the King's Gambit. I guess that's why Fischer liked d6 so early on. He was good at chess. Very good. Some say the best. I might say the best. King to f7, you should control the center. Pawn to d4. Aiming in at this pawn. Right, they can't go stuff like here because you're just going to destroy. Pawn to d5 is what I get. Takes, takes. And the difference now is that the f file is clear. So for example, let's say king g7. I like to castle here. You might be like, oh no, you're going to get checkmated. Not at all. They're going to get checkmated. Look at these bishops. Look at these snipers. It's good stuff. So typically in this position after castling, I get knight f6, which is the best move. I like to play knight c3, at which point they go knight c6. And the line I like to play here is bishop takes c7, winning a pawn. You might be like, winning a pawn. Isn't that losing a bishop? Isn't that losing? No, look at this. Rook takes, king takes. If they do, knight fork. That is another goofy one, another fun one where white would be winning. And if they don't take this bishop on c7, I think they're likely going to then go queen takes. At which point, I mean, look at this. No complaints from me. Hopefully no complaints from you. So kind of an odd video today, but I hope it was a good one. I hope it was an enjoyable one. Thank you guys as always for watching. Dislike and unsubscribe. Then maybe I won't see you later. Peace.